Hi folks, Training Tip Thursday, and this past Sunday, depending upon when people are looking at this video, I did the Houston Half Marathon, and I had posted on both Instagram and then my normal Facebook account that after a lot of thinking, I decided I was not going to wear my racing flats for this particular half marathon. I was going to go with my normal shoe to wear during the race. That prompted some questions from people. Should I wear a racing flat? Why did you decide not to wear the racing flat, etc.? Hence, this week's Training Tip Thursday. So, three groups of people that are out there. This first group, I think they're probably the largest group. I'm just pulling that number out of the air. It is the group that they never wear a racing flat. They wear the same shoe for training as they do for racing. They're a really large group. There's no law that says you have to wear a racing flat. And in fact, racing flats might not be even the right choice for you. You've got another group, group two. That's where I fit. I sometimes wear a racing flat. I will wear them in any distance shorter than a half marathon, and I wear them in most, but of course, in this particular case, not all half marathons, and I wouldn't wear them at all for anything above a half marathon. There's another group out there, very small. They always wear a racing flat, even within a marathon, but that's a really small group. But of course, the question is, might a racing flat be you? What should I know about them? So let's get into that. The first thing you have to think about if you're going to wear a racing flat is that flat going to help you run better? Not necessarily faster. You could run faster, but you don't run better, or at least the same as you were running before. I can tell you when I wear my flats, I feel like I run better. I'm a little bit lighter on my feet. It's a little bit more gazelle-like, if you will, and it is faster. But I feel like I run well in them. I just don't wear them for all my training, and we'll get to why in a minute, or why I might not wear those in particular races. But the only way you know is to try it. But the thing is, you can't try it and get enamored with, wow, this makes it faster. It makes a big difference from a weight standpoint, how much weight you're carrying. But if it doesn't help you run better, then they're not the right choice for you if you want to get into some type of racing flat. So let's talk a little bit more about it. Heel drop. Now, heel drop by itself really has nothing to do with a racing flat, but I want to comment on that because people hear about heel drop all the time. It's really kind of a buzzword lately, and what does heel drop mean? So if you have bare feet, your heel drop is 0. That simply means that the ball of your foot and the heel of your foot can hit the ground at the exact same time when you go straight down. You don't have any drop in there at all. When you have some heel drop, it means that the ball of your foot, if you're coming straight down, has the opportunity to hit the ground just a little bit before the heel does. And the heel drop in a shoe could range from 0, which a lot of racing flats are 0. There's nothing in there at all. It could be as high as 12 or 13 millimeters. So maybe the way to think about it with normal footwear is if you are wearing a flip-flop, your heel drop is 0. With most flip-flops, your heel, it's the exact same time. If you're wearing high heels, picture women in high heels, guys don't necessarily have to wear high heels, but you get the thing. It's a very big difference in drop. Contrary to popular belief, that really doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how much cushioning you might have in that shoe. So I think everybody has heard of Hokas or Hokas. The Hokas have a if I could talk, Hokas typically have a drop of about 4 or 5 millimeters, which is pretty small. A standard racing shoe is going to be more like 12 millimeters or so for a heel drop. I know a lot of you wear Brooks. Brooks are typically around 12. It's very common in a shoe. And you thought, well, how can that be? They've got this big, thick sole. It's because it's where your forefoot and heel are relative to everything else. The entire bottom of the shoe has a lot more cushioning in it. That's why you see all that thickness in there. But the heel drop is actually relatively small. Conversely, or really not as much conversely, most racing flats not only have a really low heel drop, maybe 0, maybe 1 millimeter, they typically have very little cushioning in there as well. And cushioning is one of the things you're going to consider with whether or not you're going to be able to wear that shoe. So it's not necessarily about heel drop. I bring the heel drop up for 2 reasons. 1, because people always wonder about it. Why not explain a little bit more? 2, if you are in a shoe that has 10, 11, 12 millimeter heel drop and you want to try a racing flat, you have to go into them slowly, because if your foot is used to landing like this with that heel up and all of a sudden you're bringing it down, you have to have strength and flexibility in the Achilles and the back of your calf to be able to make that difference. If you don't, you will get injured, and we don't want any of you to get injured, so you have to play with that a little bit. So let's take a look at my shoes. So this is one of the shoes I normally wear for training. This has about a 4mm heel drop. You can see that there's a little bit of cushioning in here. You can't always tell the cushioning by looking at the shoe, but this one gives it to you. If you look, it would look like there's almost none, but you can see it goes up ever so slightly. That can also be misleading. It depends upon how the shoe manufacturer does it. But this is a lot more cushioning than you would have in a regular racing flat. This is the flat that I would typically use for a half marathon. Let's see if there's some way to do these just side by side. It doesn't look as good in the film, but this is a much lighter shoe. There's very little cushioning in here. The heel drop is actually fairly similar. I think this is 2mm, so it's not a lot different than the other shoe, but what's very different is the amount of cushioning in here. To give you another difference, I always look at the weight of a shoe in a men's size 9 because that's how they publish everything. I wear a 12, so these weights are different, but for the sake of example, here's where they are. This shoe, my training shoe in a size 9, is just a little bit over 9 ounces in this shoe. This particular shoe in a size 9 is about 6 ounces when it comes to the weight of the shoe. So roughly a 3-ounce difference. So if I look at a half marathon, let's say I'm doing 180 steps a minute, which is probably relatively close to what I'm going to be doing in a half marathon. In this particular case, I was out there running for 94 minutes. Well, 180 steps per minute times 3 ounces times 94 minutes, the difference between these two shoes is lifting 2.5 tons more weight. I'd way rather lift 2.5 tons less if I can, because it's got to be easier to do a little bit less weight. But I didn't decide that. I decided to go with this shoe. So why? You've got really a variety of surfaces that you can run on, and lately my surfaces have either been crushed limestone, which is a path that we have in the St. Charles area where the Great Western Half Marathon takes place. We've got asphalt trails. Do a lot of running on asphalt trails in the summer. It's a path along a river, again back in Illinois. It's asphalt on top of dirt. That's not as soft of a surface as crushed limestone, but it's still a really soft surface. Then you've got asphalt roads. Those are a little bit harder than what that path is going to be, and the hardest surface of all to run on is concrete. So the Houston half marathon and marathon has a fair amount of concrete. It is a mixture of asphalt on the roads and concrete. So it is the hardest surface of all, and then the second hardest surface, which is your roads. When I did the Great Western Half Marathon this past May on a very soft surface, which was that crushed limestone, I wore a shoe that was even a touch lighter than this. It's about a 5.2 ounce shoe, and even lighter. And I'll tell you what, I made it through the race. I was really sore the next few days. I just said this, in retrospect, that shoe was a little bit too light. Was I saving a lot of weight? Yes, but I was also beating up my body, and that has an impact on your performance as well. So one of the reasons I got this shoe is I knew that was coming up were races on the Fox River Trail, which would be a little bit softer surface, and then on asphalt to kind of see, well, how would I do with this? So I use this for what's called the Fox Valley Marathon, which some of you are familiar with. That's a combination of roads and the trail, most of it on the trail, so a little bit softer. And with this shoe, I was not quite as sore as I was after Great Western, but I was still on the sore side. I also used it for the Naperville Half Marathon, which was 100% on asphalt. There might have been a touch of concrete here and there, but all on asphalt. And I was pretty sore from that. So that's why I made the decision for Houston that when I add in the fact that there's going to be a lot of concrete, the hardest surface, yep, I'd save a lot of weight running in this. I think I run better in this. But I want that little bit more cushioning. Otherwise, I think that beating up on my legs, not only the soreness after the race, which frankly I can live with that, I think that has an effect on your performance the last few miles because it just starts beating down your body. So how did this work out? So I ran that race in, one of the better times that I've had in a while. If it hadn't been for the fact that I started in the wrong corral and had to do a lot of weaving to get around some slower people, even though I didn't surge, I'd have been pretty darn close to a PR even in a heavier shoe. I'm recording this a couple days after the race, and I'm not sore at all. It was really a lot better on my body. So is a racing flat right for you? I'll go back to what I said before. The first thing is the only way you know is to try that flat. And then you have to figure out, do you run better in it? If you run better in it, then the next thing you have to figure out is what distances can I do? I think virtually anybody, if they run better in it, can for sure do a 5 or a 10K. A half marathon is where a lot of people start dropping off and saying, I'm not doing my flat anymore. I tend to do so if I can. Again, on this course, I said I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to think about the next asphalt course because I felt a lot better than after Naperville. So maybe even on asphalt, I need to do this. I wouldn't do it for a marathon at all. You might be able to. So that's a little bit about racing flats.